That is the position I've taken. I'd like to walk through what do we mean here in the evolution of this concept of smart cities. Our interests generally are because we have noticed a significant pace of urbanization, changes in the land use. We, as the provider of services on energy front, transportation and housing, facing challenges. At the same time, our concerns on the frontiers of sustainability, where we are interested, how do we cope up with our resource consumption? How do we manage our waste emissions? How do we look after health of the community? Having recognized the importance of climate change, how do we reflect it to make the city as resilient as possible? How do we address the risks? We all know the situations in the cities are unsustainable. We need to address them in a proactive manner. We need a strategic approach. We are not going to solve this problem by doing projects. That's period. This is not a place of a city, an urban space, where I do 5 projects and I call this as a city moving towards sustainability. We have to be away from the project centric, or I would say project limited approach, and we have to have a participatory process involving everybody. We got to be process driven. This is not going to be sustainable if we don't follow these 2 principles of following a process and involving people, not looking at people that just dumb to accept what we give. Years ago, in 2000, ministers of different states of India came together, ministers of environment, and coined a program called EcoCity. And this was coordinated by the Central Pollution Control then. And this project ran like a Santa Claus. And people used the budgets to build fountains, to replace broken waste bins by better bins, planted trees, and they call this as Eco City. The budgets, when they were exhausted, the cities which were dotted with projects which looks very sexy, again were back to where they were before. There was an experiment then done in Kumarkom, Kottayam, where we attempted a process-driven approach involving people. 800 children in city of Kottayam went through a painting competition to dream how they would look at their city. And the nice, lovely pictures which came out of it were put on the hoardings of the buses. They made a logo out of it, and people got involved. I still remember we called 60 people who mattered in Kottayam, put on the walls the map of Kottayam, gave everybody a red and a green pen, and people walked to the wall to say what's wrong in this city and what's good, which needs to be replicated. And we collated these 4 maps. We made a city action plan for city sustainability. We involved people. That was a process driven approach. Few years ago, I worked for a year and a half in Sangli Miraj Kupwad because Minister then Jain Patil was keen that something should be done. And it took me 18 months to spend in Sangli Miraj Kupwad to prepare a plan of Eco City, which finally had to be presented to the council and get it approved. It was a process which was very hard. We had to really work against the wall. But that gave me an understanding what do we mean in preparing a city action plan on sustainability. And that was quite the learning. The World Bank added to Eco 2 and called as the Eco 2 cities. And the whole idea was to emphasize economic advantage of going green. And then they produced some of the wonderful guidance manuals and did a few pilots. And that was more recently picked up by the Asian Development Bank, calling the program as Green Cities, which is energy environment embedded, 2 capital E's. And one even would say ecology, economy embedded within green term, and launched this program. And as a pilot, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand triangle picked up city of Malacca as a case. And right now, I'm working in the city of Malacca, in the state of Malacca. The chief minister there is really committed, trying to develop a program of green cities. We are using their very interesting mobile applications based on gamification, where a citizen of Malacca, a tourist to Malacca, Malacca has 1 million people living, 14 million tourists coming in. So right from Kuala Lumpur Airport, how do you get onto this mobile app and earn green points as you live green? It's a very interesting experiment of gamification. How do we make people not just aware, but addicted to become green and act? That's more important than making just the plans. And that was one reason. The World Health Organization came with this. That's not me. I don't want to be that, but healthy cities. Yeah. And what is interesting as a healthy linked to the term livable city, changing the way we live. So it's not about a smart infrastructure, but a smart mind which we need to get created. That's much more daunting than creating just the infrastructure. And you weave in wellness, action in terms of play, and nutrition. And these became interesting thematics, the way we draw this diagram for sustainability as environment, economic, and social. Obviously, today we add one more circle of being ethical. And that's also equally important when we define sustainability. So healthy cities became another term and programs driven through WHO. That widened the canvas in terms of the term sustainability. And the interesting elements which were brought in, apart from what was talked in the eco-city thinking, was governance, equity, at the same time diversity, and community well-being. So this became another terminology to describe how do we go about towards sustainability in cities. We now see some thematics, and low carbon became another emphasis after we all recognize the seriousness of global warming. And the greenhouse gas inventarization in the cities became, in some sense, a basis to make a city planning cycle, which will go a step by step to keep tracking how are we doing when it comes to GHG emissions. And I thought it was a very interesting concept to show how a thematic moves and drives the planning cycle in a city. And then you come up with a bunch of low carbon city projects which you undertake because you want to move more and more towards carbon neutrality. The assumption is getting or doing well on carbon, doing well on energy, doing well on water resources, doing well on how do we put or plow back waste into resources again or derive energy and so on and so forth. And it hits very well to the mobility sector, particularly when it comes to reducing the GHG emissions. The Rockefeller Foundation started supporting this idea of resilient cities. And I think the drive was how do we address the vulnerability due to climate change? And obviously, making a city resilient would mean a lot in terms of the economic front, of course, the environmental front, as well as the social front. So, in some sense, sustainability got embedded in this concept of resiliency. And you can bring now here in this concept together all these ideas of livable cities, resilient cities, and sustainable cities, and presenting a more and more integrated perspective. There's also similar correspondence between sustainability and the resiliency. And you will see in this diagram how adaptation, transformation, recovery or renovation, and other forcing functions around the city looked at the same time to make the city both sustainable and resilient. The capping more recent concept, which we all are discussing here, is the smartness of the city. And are these the cities for the future? Few questions. In the concept, are we too much getting ourselves projectized? Are we process driven here? Are we recognizing the importance of participatory approach? Is the concept best done for Mr. Deshpande BKC zones? Or is it for the entire city? Are we talking something too ambitious? Is it something good for greenfield cities? I do work a lot on the city of Gift. You know, Gift is a very interesting experiment. I'm working last several years to build the concept of sustainability, where we are gone at the level of reformulating the DCR itself, or is it a concept where we recognize retrofitting? Can it be applied for cities which are already at a stage where it is very hard to change? There could be combinations where we bring in low carbon interests and smart cities, but you won't be able to see this slide. It's pretty busy in text. But we could do selective integration of smartness. So it need not be only limited to a zone, but it could be also direct to certain interventions and take advantage of the smart technologies. This is my ending slide with few questions. So first question, are smart cities relevant for India today? We got to ask this question and answer as critically, as objectively. Is this a paradigm only for new cities? Are smart cities alone sustainable? How do we integrate various key elements, we saw them earlier, to strengthen the smart concept? So are we looking then for smart and sustainable solutions where smartness adds a value? We got to be, as I said earlier, process driven, integrated, participatory. If smart and sustainable is the vision, that's important to recognize because being just smart is not going to be enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very pointedly brought out the issues, and the last slide is really one which you can take for brainstorming. And now I invite Madam Anita to say on behalf of her, particularly she is from the Mahindras, and I'm sure that there are many things that they have done. So let us hear her.
Thank you, distinguished speakers, members of the audience. A very good morning to all of you. I think we spoke a couple of times about the World Environment Day this morning and the theme of 7 billion people, one planet consumed with care. And if you look at it, a lot of that consumption is happening in cities across the world today. Cities account for just 2% of the land mass, but they account for 65% of energy consumption, 60% of greenhouse gases emission, and obviously is 60% of economic activity. But the point really is that with the concentration of energy consumption, greenhouse gases, people, and activities into cities, what does the world need to do to make cities smarter? That's what we have been trying to address over the last 2 days. In the Indian context, I don't think that is irrelevant. India was only about 25% urbanized in the 90s, moved to 35% urbanization levels last year. We're talking about moving to 42% urbanization levels in 2030. And that's about 300 million people being added to the current 350 million people who live in India's urban environments. So I think it's a question that is extremely relevant and something that is good that is being debated over the last 2 days. Because we definitely need to do something in a structured framework, in a planned manner, but reasonably in a hurry if we want to get our cities to be more livable, more resilient, and more sustainable. What I'd like to spend the next few minutes is to talk about our own experiences in the group in our real estate division over the last 15 years that we've been in existence. We have three business verticals. I'm going to focus only on one because it is a greenfield approach to smart city development. But a very quick reference to the other two. When we started out doing residential developments across cities, we decided to go green. So, about 10 years back, all of our projects from the design stage, construction stage, implementation stage, and therefore end use state are green developments. So, we have a green footprint of about 20 million square feet of development. And we are not, definitely not, one of the biggest real estate developers in the country. In fact, we must be one of the smallest. But it was a mandate to go completely green and therefore cut down on energy consumption, water consumption, and improve indoor air quality for people living in homes. Today, we've actually gone out and done living building assessments to test the efficacy of that proof of concept that we were trying to establish. And we found that some of the projects we've completed and have people living there for the last 3 years are actually seeing 25% lower energy consumption, 23% lower water consumption, and a superior indoor air quality. So that to us has been a fitting response to how do we go more and more into at least reducing the energy and water consumption footprint of the buildings that are put out there. I think most of you must be aware that we often think a lot of energy consumption happens in industry. Buildings account for 30 to 35% of energy consumption in the country today. And for us, that was an important imperative to look at really how do we look at completely going green on all our buildings so that we at least reduce the consumption footprint of CO2 that we generate in the atmosphere. That was one approach to what we defined as looking at sustainable urbanization. The second is very new, it's just less than 2 years old, is the whole entry into the space of low cost housing. To me, that again is part of sustainable urbanization because it is about social inclusion. It is about ensuring that you don't have slums in the environment around you. How do you plan housing to include a lot more people? And there again, we've had interesting results around financial inclusion, where today 40% of our customers in low cost housing come from the informal sector because we've partnered very strongly with the banking industry to actually enable loans. But what I'll spend the next 10 minutes on is our third area of operation, which is the Mahindra World City.